Hello to everyone and welcome back to Spherical Chicken in a Vacuum. Today I will try to convince you that publishing scientific books is the worst form of publishing, even worse than predatory journals. And I don't know if you're familiar with the topic, but basically, when you buy a scientific book, I'm speaking about those books that are made by an academic editor that invites scientists to write some chapters of the book. Basically, it's a collection of chapters written by different academics. And when you buy one of those books, you sometimes end up with something that is not exactly what you expected. Well, what I mean, if you don't really know who the editor is and who the authors is, are, actually, you can end up with a lot of chapters that are too in focused, out of focus, meaning that they are too detailed or even on a different topic. So they don't really fit into the book. You can end up with things that are very old and like many years old. You can end up with chapters that are inflated, then the results are made much bigger than they actually are. You can end up, and this is very common, with poor, cheap copies of articles that the same authors already wrote before. So the same author of the chapter just takes what he previously published and makes a poor copy of it and publishes it as a new book chapter. Or you can have with just straight shit, meaning contents chapters that don't have any real scientific content. Most of the cases, I'm not saying that all scientific books are like this, but if you don't know what you are buying, you will end up with a linear combination of these five things. So chapters that don't really fit into the book, old, inflated, copied, or trash, garbage. And this is the reality. Scientific books have really loose control on their content. Again, not all books, most of them. And I know I'm biased. We probably love scientific books. I hate them because I had a bad experience. I had a bad experience with an editor that modified the chapter that I wrote, added his name as an author, and changed all the contents of the chapter. But please keep in mind, I might be biased. I want to tell you up front, I might be biased, but please just listen to me. Okay, I introduced before the publication process for manuscripts. The authors write the manuscript, they send the manuscript to the journal. The journal picks some editors, scientific editors, that will manage the paper, the article. The editor can reject the paper or can send the paper to some reviewers for a peer review. The reviewers then can propose for a rejection. They can propose for accepting the paper, or they can start a process of sending comments back to the authors, and the authors make corrections. The reviewers make new comments, and the authors make new corrections, and so on until the paper is finally published or rejected. But now let's imagine that we are like an evil scientist and we are trying to push our agenda or research to be published online. So we are authors of the paper, we send the paper to the journal, and if everything was fine, the editor will notice if something is strange, if something is unfair, scammy, or anything else. Well, not always, okay, but depends on the journal, depends on the editor. There are many variables, but this can also be fixed at a later time, right? The papers can be retracted from the journal. Then, if the editor doesn't act as a filter, then maybe the reviewers can act as a filter and stop the garbage from being published. But what if the evil author is also the evil editor? Then he has a sort of higher control. He can push his own agenda, he can avoid rejection of the paper and try to choose the reviewers the better fit for his idea. France, for example. But what if the evil scientist is also the evil reviewer? In this case, he controls all the steps. He can write his own garbage, support his own garbage, review his own garbage, and in the end, publish his own garbage. And there's very little control at this point that the publisher or the journal, but this is not a journal thing anymore because it's a book in this case. But with books, it works exactly like this. Well, again, not all books, but even large publisher, even famous publishers allow the editor to be also an author and to control the peer review of the papers that are to be published in the book. And things can get one step worse than this because, well, he can also be the only reviewer because at this point there's no real control on the quality of the peer review anymore. Everything is in the hands of the editors, and the editor is the evil scientist. One of the editors is the evil scientist, so he can control the peer review of his own work. And we can go one step further, and the evil scientist can be also the only editor of the book. So he writes his own shit, he supports his own shit, he reviews his own shit, he publishes his own shit. And well, I'm sorry to say, but even famous large publishers like Springer and Elsevier fall in this scheme, let's say, and allow editors of books to have a huge control on the contents of the book itself. And what can actually an editor do? Well, it depends a lot. Sometimes he can even mess up with the content of the paper, and this happened to me. Title and content of the paper was changed. In some cases, you see that the name of the editor popping up in papers from other groups where they didn't contribute. So they add their own names to papers that are published in the book, chapters that are published in the book. And they can even remove the name of the authors if they want. You may think this is extreme, but I have an example from Elsevier. In this case, a book that was published in 2017 and a new edition was coming out in 2023, an update, but the original author did not want to write an update for her own chapter. So what did the editors do? Well, they just removed her and gave the finished chapter, not and they didn't ask someone to rewrite the chapter. They gave the chapter to someone else that modified the chapter maybe, and they publish under their own name. So control even on the authors. Of course, this is against ethics, deontology, whatever you want to call them. There are plenty of rules against this when you publish uh, articles, scientific articles. The controls are very strict, well, somehow strict. When you publish books, well, it gets much more foggy, and things like this happen. And editors have a lot more power, and also books are less likely to get retracted if something is found at a later time to be unethical, let's say. So this kind of unethical behaviors, okay, you can say, oh yeah, but she gave the copyright to Elsevier in this case, so she lost the control of her own stuff, etc., etc. But that is still against every deontological rule. Okay, this is unethical, even considering that she gave up the copyright. Okay, I think it's pretty clear. But for books, as you see, things tends to be much more flexible. So, what's the advantage of this thing? Well, for publishers, books are a sort of a source of revenue. You sell books, and they are very overpriced. Scientific books can go for hundreds of US dollars, as you know. The chapters of the books can be indexed inside of Web of Science and Scopebooks, etc. So they can also collect citations. And this is one of the advantages of being the evil editor of a book. Not all editors are like that. But if you want to be an evil editor, you can inflate your own H-index by putting up, adding your name to all the chapters of a book, for example, or writing all the chapters of your book without really inviting other scientists to contribute. And by self-citing, citing your previous work, you can sort of control your H index. Of course, this doesn't work if you are, well, like a scientist with 120 of H index, because it's very difficult to go from 120 to 121. But if you are sort of in the 20s, 30s, 40s, yeah, this can help a lot, this kind of control. Also, you can publish a lot of stuff in just 1 year, even crappy stuff, because at this point you are your own judge, right? And there's another benefit for the authors. The authors can get a small fraction of the money. The editors, sorry, not the authors. The authors don't get anything, but the editors can, in some cases, depends on the contract, get something for each copy that has been sold. And if you are some big name scientist in your own country and you force all of your students to buy a book, okay, this will not make millions of US dollars, but it can somehow bring you some small extra income. Well, and imagine that you're not just a scientist, but the head of a department, and you force all the department to do that, or you are working in a hospital, you force all of your co-workers to do this, to all of the people that they control. Well, you can somehow collect a little bit of money. We will never get rich out of this business, but even small money is money, and this sometimes helps people. Well, helps people can act in strange ways even for very little amounts of money. And it doesn't really affect the publisher, because yes, they collect citations, but there's no impact factor for books. So even if you write a crappy book which is full of shit, that will never affect your level, your fame. If you are a big publisher, nothing changes to you, even if a book is full of crap. So there's no downside for you. You will get some revenue from the books you actually sell. You don't do any editorial work, because you give everything to do to the academic editors, and they get extra points of each index. They write a lot of chapters, and they can collect a little bit more money. So everyone is happy, apart from, of course, the ontology, the world of science, scientific community is damaged by this behavior, but everyone else is happy. So yeah, this is basically why I think that books, in some cases, are worse than predatory publishers, because they can use the name of really big and famous publishers, because they don't care, to promote crappy science and crappy behaviors, unethical behaviors. And again, let me stress this one last time. Not all books are like this, but there's no real control. So people is abusing this mechanism because it's possible. And you know that when something doesn't really have a control, then a lot of people will abuse the system. And this is what is happening. And everyone knows it, I think, because you all have crappy books in your library now, because you read the title and said, oh, this is perfect for me. And the contents is just academic garbage, right? Well, if not, well, you're lucky, or I am unlucky. Well, this is everything I have to say to you today, and see you next time.